Chapter 23. After the basketball game, Sumiko made extra sure that nobody saw her when she went to the fields. But the next few times she went, Frank wasn't there anyway. By late October, the camp had managed to find enough teachers to start a school, which was to be held in empty barracks. One day, Sumiko and Sachi walked by the barracks where some teachers had just moved in. "One of the teachers is Negro," Sachi said. "I saw her. Another one is German. Her father is a Nazi. I saw her too." Sumiko never knew what ratio of lies to truth Sachi told, and even if she knew the ratio, she wouldn't have known which was the truth percentage and which was not. Just to find out how it felt to tell a whopper, Sumiko said, "One of the teachers is from the circus. She used to be a trapeze artist." Sachi looked wonderingly at Sumiko, which made Sumiko feel kind of good. Lying certainly offered satisfactions, but the problem was it left a bad aftertaste. On the first day of school, Sumiko braided her hair and put on her mint green dress. It was tight under the arms and shorter than it used to be. At first she thought it had shrunk, but then she realized she'd grown. But it was still the best dress she owned. She and Tak Tak each took a chair from their home and stepped outside. As they walked, they saw dozens of other kids also carrying their chairs in the dust. Sumiko dropped Tak Tak off at his classroom and saw that his teacher was Negro. She wondered whether her own teacher would be the daughter of a Nazi. Inside her classroom, there were no tables. In fact, there was nothing at all except a young, sweaty, white woman standing at the front of the room. She held up a sign that read, "I am Miss Kelly." When everyone had finished, Miss Kelly made them sing patriotic songs for an hour. Then Miss Kelly asked whether anybody had any questions. Someone raised his hand. "Miss Kelly?" "Yes." "Why aren't you married?" Everyone giggled. Miss Kelly's mouth fell open, and then she smiled and said, "That's personal." The boy raised his hand again, but she ignored him. Nobody else raised a hand. For a second, Miss Kelly looked like she might cry. Sumiko felt sorry for her. A boy called out, "Will you marry me?" Everybody laughed. Then Miss Kelly passed around a novel called The King of the Island. It was an old, beat-up book that nobody had ever heard of. Miss Kelly said each teacher had been given exactly one book for a class. Miss Kelly made everybody in class read a page out loud and then pass it on to the next person. After that, it was lunchtime, and after lunch, Miss Kelly let them leave early, partly because it was the first day, and partly because none of the boys had returned from lunch. In Camp 3, there were Caucasian teachers, Nasi teachers, and one Negro teacher. Nasi were the second generation of Naki, but the first generation born in America. For most of the Nasi teachers, this was their first teaching job. Though they'd graduated college with teaching degrees, before camp, they hadn't been able to find jobs because of their race. At one time, Sumiko had been looking forward to school, but now that she had her garden, school seemed kind of useless. The only people who seemed to take it seriously were the teachers. One of the Caucasian teachers didn't last long. Turnover was high from the start, but this woman suffered an actual nervous breakdown and had to leave. Sumiko thought maybe it was the dust that drove teachers away. You couldn't escape it. Sometimes you could ignore it, but when you had nothing to do, you were aware of dirt grains on your scalp and up your nose and in your eyes. And no matter if you closed your door, you found it all over your sheets and your floors. Some of the Christians in camp said God was testing them with this dust. Tak Tak said, "What happens if you fail the dust test?" Sumiko didn't know. Though she knew it was wrong, Sumiko couldn't help feeling kind of satisfied when the teachers left. White people had put them in this camp, and yet they couldn't take it. She remembered how a few months ago one of the planes that buzzed camp just to harass them had crashed, and several Naki had applauded. It serves them right, people had said. Sumiko figured that Hakujin thought they were better than the Japanese and the Indians. The Indians didn't seem to particularly like whites or Japanese. And Japanese didn't want to socialize with the Indians and resented the whites. So nobody liked anybody much. She told this to Ichiro, and he said, "That's why we have laws." She told this to Bull, and he said, "Well, remember the Quakers." Sumiko had forgotten all about them and about the woman who'd taken care of Mrs. Ono's dog, and she had even forgotten about Miss Kelly, who was nice enough to work here and teaching them, when she could have gotten a job outside instead. Ichiro and his friends liked to argue about laws, race, and camp. One night, a friend of Ichiro's, who was visiting, exclaimed that he was sick of camp and was going to look into finding work outside. He was one of Ichiro's most outspoken friends. Before Pearl Harbor, they used to double date in their fancy clothes. "Camp is jail," he told them. He and Ichiro were leaning against a wall smoking. Sumiko watched the smoke wind through the dim barrack. "We were put here to be safe," Auntie said. "Mother, that is not why they put us here," Ichiro said. Ichiro's friend muttered, "Your mother talks like an Inu." Sumiko stayed very still so nobody would notice her and make her leave. Ichiro said, "My mother is not an Inu. She just doesn't understand." Auntie said, "I understand all I need to." Then everybody started yelling about exactly why they were in camp. Tak-Tak ran to his bed and pulled the covers over his head. "We're in camp because of prejudice, pure and simple," shouted Ichiro's friend. "We were put here for our own protection," Auntie insisted again, "to protect us from all the people who hate us." Ichiro said, "That's ridiculous. If I hate someone, should the person I hate be put in jail to protect them? And now there are rumors that they're going to start drafting us right out of this jail." Bull was sitting at the table reading the day's chronicle and acting as if he couldn't hear a thing. But for some reason, Ichiro turned on him. "Are you going to be willing to fight if your family has no rights?" Sumiko was shocked. She knew that because of their ancestry, Nissi had been declared ineligible to join the military. And she heard that some Nissi were trying to get the government to make them eligible again. But she had assumed it would never happen. Yet Ichiro seemed to feel it would happen. "I'm going to be willing to fight because my family has no rights," Bull said. "Can't you see that's wrong?" Ichiro shouted. "Then let's show them how wrong they are," Bull said quietly. "It's their responsibility to learn to live by their own laws. Why do we have to teach them to follow their laws?" Sumiko waited for Bull to answer, but Bull didn't answer. Sumiko knew there was no answer. Ichiro and Bull glared at each other. "Nobody's going to want to serve with us," Ichiro finally said. "Nobody's going to want to command us. Nobody wants us, Bull." Tak-Tak sat up and said, "Bull?" Bull whipped toward him. "Can't you stupid kids?" He stopped. Tak-Tak looked mortified. Sumiko pulled Tak-Tak out of the bed and took him outside to look at Mr. Moto's snake, which was sleeping. Mr. Moto had kept this particular snake for a while and seemed to have grown fond of it. It was unusually long, and it even seemed a little fat. People on the block called it Snaky, as if it was a pet. She put her arms around Tak-Tak as they studied the snake. "Will you come to watch if I ever play in a marbles tournament?" he asked her. "Yes, if you want." "Okay," he said. "Snaky's sleeping." "His eyes are open. Mr. Moto says they sleep with their eyes open," Tak-Tak said, clearly proud he knew something Sumiko didn't. "Really? You're so smart." He beamed. "I like Snaky," Tak-Tak said. "We could set him free before anyone eats him." Sumiko considered the idea, but setting Snaky free would be like stealing him from Mr. Moto. She figured a lot of the kids stole things, but you couldn't steal from a neighbor. You had to draw the line somewhere. She rested her chin on Tak-Tak's head and said, "Don't do anything with Mr. Moto's snake. It belongs to him." She gazed out at the dark forms of mesquite trees in the distance. Ichiro said the administration had decided Poston needed a barbed wire fence, allegedly to keep the cattle owned by the Indians from wandering into camp. Indians were going to put up the fence. Since nobody had ever seen one of these cattle wandering into camp, that reasoning wasn't going over very well, especially with people like Ichiro and his friends. Tak-Tak said, "Is Bull mad at me?" "Of course not." Tak-Tak looked surprised. "He said, 'stupid.'" He didn't mean it. Sumiko could smell cigarette smoke from inside. She could hear that the grown-ups seemed to have finished arguing. "Are you ready for bed?" she asked. "Can I say good night to Snaky?" "Okay." Tak-Tak leaned forward until his glasses clinked against the cage. "Good night, Snaky." Snaky didn't react. His eyes just stared out into the night. "He's sleeping," Tak-Tak said again. Sumiko led him back inside. Ichiro went off with his friend as the rest of the family got ready for bed. When it was dark, Bull got out of bed and knelt by Tak-Tak's bed. "Tak-chan," he said, "I want to tell you something." "What?" "I want to tell you a knock-knock joke." Tak-Tak started laughing even before Bull told the joke. "Knock-knock." "Who's there?" "Mesquite." "Mesquite who?" "Whisper, whisper." He was giggling hard now. Bull leaned over and whispered something into the ear of Tak-Tak, who erupted into utter hysterics. What a nice sound that was. When he calmed down, Bull stroked Tak-Tak's forehead and said quietly, "Good night, Tak-chan."